Day 78. The last can of peaches is gone. The generator is coughing its last breath. They're scratching at the maintenance door again, a sound I know better than my own heartbeat. I don't know if this recording will ever be found, but this is my testament and my plan to get out. Day 78. The log entry feels final. I roll the empty tin of Del Monte peaches in my palm, the metal still cold. The syrupy ghost of its contents is the last sweet thing I'll taste for a while, maybe forever. The silence in here is a living thing. It breathes in the dusty, stale air of the shoe heaven stockroom I call home. It's a heavy silence, thick with the memory of screams, both mine and others. But it's the sounds from outside this room that really matter now, the scratching. It's not constant, not like in the beginning. In the first weeks, it was a symphony of the damned, 1,000 nails on 1,000 doors. Now it's more sporadic, more patient, a dry, rasping scrape at the reinforced maintenance door every few minutes. A reminder, we're still here, we're still hungry. The generator in the sublevel is dying. I can hear its heartbeat through the concrete floor, a weak, sputtering cough that's getting slower. The lights flicker more than they stay on now. I've been living in a strobe light nightmare for the past 3 days. Soon, it will be just darkness, total, absolute darkness, save for my flashlight and the moonlight that filters through the grime on the skylights. The darkness is a different kind of monster. The dead don't care about the light, but I do. It's my shield. It keeps the deeper shadows in my own mind at bay. Without it, I can't think about that. Not now. Focus. The plan. It's all about the plan. I have it laid out on the floor, a massive blueprint of the Westgate Galleria I found in the manager's office on day 4. It's covered in my own frantic scrawls, notes, and calculations. Red ink for their migration patterns. Blue for water sources, mostly from the cisterns on the roof. Green for potential supply caches I never had the guts or the gear to reach. And a single, thick black line that snakes from here, through the guts of the mall, down to the underground parking garage and to the armored security van I've been working on for a month. It looks like a child's drawing of a treasure map, if the treasure was a chance to not be eaten alive. My name is Alex, or it was. I don't feel like an Alex anymore. I'm just the survivor in the shoe store, a ghost haunting a retail mausoleum. I started this audio log on a little digital recorder I found in an electronics store. The battery is miraculously still going. I thought maybe someday someone would find it, a record of what happened here. But now I think it's for me. A way to keep my thoughts straight, to prove I'm still human. Because after 78 days alone with the dead, you start to forget. You start to see the world through their eyes. A simple, brutal calculus of hunger and movement. I have to get out. Tomorrow at dawn, it's my only window. I've been watching them for weeks. Their morning lull, when the new light seems to confuse them, make them sluggish. It lasts for maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes to cross 500 yards of hell. It's insane. It's a suicide mission. But staying here is just a slower suicide. A death by starvation, by darkness, by madness. I choose to die on my feet. I choose to run. So this is it, the last entry before I go. If I make it, I'll start a new log. Day 1, outside. And if I don't, well, if you're listening to this, it means they got me. Don't make the mistakes I did. Don't trust the silence. Don't underestimate their patience. And whatever you do, don't go for the peaches first. Always secure the hardware store. Always. That was mistake number 1. And in this world, you rarely get to make mistake number 2. I remember the sound. That's the thing that sticks with me the most from day 1. Not the sights, not the smells, though God knows I can summon those from the depths of my memory without trying, But the sound. It was the sound of the world breaking, the sound of 1,000 panes of glass shattering at once, a crystalline symphony of collapse that echoed from the main atrium through every corridor and storefront. I was in Novel Ideas, the bookstore on the second floor, looking for a birthday card for my sister. A stupid, mundane, wonderfully normal task. I was debating between one with a cat wearing a party hat and a more sentimental one. I remember the feel of the glossy cardstock in my hands. And then the sound hit. It wasn't an explosion. It was a wave, a pressure wave of pure noise. The floor vibrated, and every book on every shelf rattled. A few toppled over. I dropped the cards. My first thought was an earthquake. I'm a California kid. It's baked into your DNA. Duck and cover. But then the screaming started. It wasn't the panicked yelling of an earthquake. This was different. This was a raw, primal, animal terror. The kind of sound that bypasses your ears and sinks straight into your spine. I ran to the front of the store, which had one of those open front designs, looking out over the main concourse below. What I saw, my brain couldn't process it at first. It was chaos, but it wasn't random. People were running, yes, but they were running from something. And the things they were running from, they were people too, or they had been. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, stumbling, lurching, but with a terrifying speed. One of them caught a man in a business suit. The man fell, and the thing just fell on top of him. I saw its head dip down, and then the man's screams became a wet, gurgling shriek that was cut short. I felt a vomit climb up my throat. My mind was a static-filled radio, trying to find a station that made sense. A prank? A movie shoot? A flash mob gone horribly wrong? But the blood was real. It was spreading across the polished white tiles of the concourse like a spilled can of paint. That's when the security gate started coming down. A deafening metallic roar as the mall went into lockdown. I saw a security guard fumbling with a key card by the main entrance, his face a mask of disbelief, before two of those things swarmed him. I turned and ran. Not towards the exits. It was too late for that. I ran deeper into the store, back into the stockroom. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. I slammed the heavy metal door shut and fumbled with the lock. It clicked into place, and I leaned against it, gasping for air, the screams and the shattering glass now muffled. I was trapped. I didn't know it then, but that stockroom, that bookstore, was the first of many cages. I spent that first night in the dark, huddled between boxes of unsold celebrity autobiographies, listening to the world end outside my door. The sounds changed as the hours wore on. The screams of the living gave way to the groans of the dead. A low, constant, guttural moan that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the building. Occasionally, something would bang against the stockroom door, a dull thud that made my heart leap into my throat. But they didn't try to break it down. It was as if they were just wandering, bumping into things, lost. That first night, I cried, silently, tears tracking paths through the dust on my cheeks. I cried for the man in the suit, for the security guard, for the life I had just hours before debating birthday cards. By morning, the crying had stopped. A cold, hard clarity had taken its place. The world had changed. The rules were different now. And if I wanted to see another sunrise, I had to change with it. The first week was a blur of thirst and terror. I didn't leave the bookstore stockroom for 3 days. The moaning from outside was a constant, terrifying lullaby. I had no food, and worse, no water. By the end of day 3, my tongue felt thick and swollen, and a pounding headache had taken root behind my eyes. I knew if I stayed, I would die of dehydration. The choice was simple: face the monsters or die in a box. I took a heavy metal pipe from a broken shelf, my first weapon. It felt flimsy and inadequate. I remember practicing swings in the dark, the whoosh of the pipe cutting through the stale air, sounding ridiculously loud. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip it. Before I opened the door, I did the smartest thing I've probably ever done. I climbed the shelving units to a small, grimy window that looked out into the bookstore itself. I could see two of them. One was shuffling aimlessly near the checkout counter, a former employee by her uniform, her jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. The other was on the ground, crawling, dragging a broken leg behind it. They were slow, uncoordinated. That gave me a sliver of hope. I planned my route. Out the stockroom door, a hard right, past the new releases section and into the mall's main corridor. My target was the food court on the opposite side of the second floor. It was a long shot, but I remembered the drink fountains. Water was the priority. I took a deep breath, counted to 3, and unlocked the door. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot. The shuffling in the store stopped. I held my breath. A low groan echoed from near the counter. I eased the door open a crack. The female employee was now staring right at me. Her eyes were milky white, devoid of any recognition. There was no intelligence there, just a predatory instinct. She started moving towards me, a slow, clumsy shamble. It was now or never. I burst out of the stockroom, sprinting. My legs felt weak and clumsy after days of inactivity. I didn't engage, I just ran. I vaulted a display of self-help books, sending them scattering across the floor. The crawling one snapped at my ankle as I passed, its teeth clicking inches from my heel. I didn't look back. I burst into the main corridor, and the scale of the horror hit me full in the face. The place was a war zone. Bodies, both human and not, were strewn everywhere. The air was thick with the coppery smell of blood. And there were dozens of them, everywhere, milling about. Some were just standing, swaying. Others were hunched over fallen bodies. But they were all slow. The sound of my running feet on the tiles drew their attention. Heads snapped in my direction. A chorus of groans rose up. It was like kicking an anthill. They all started moving towards me. I've never run so fast in my life. Adrenaline was a fire in my veins. I dodged and weaved, my world narrowed to the path in front of me and the grasping hands that reached for me. I made it to the food court. The metal security grates were halfway down, leaving a gap about 3 feet high. I slid under it, scraping my back on the rough metal, and scrambled to my feet inside. I was safe, for the moment. The food court was empty. I ran to the nearest soda fountain at a Burger Baron and pushed the lever for water. Nothing. The power was out, of course. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp. Then I remembered the back rooms, the kitchens. There had to be water there. I found a prep kitchen and in it a large sink. I turned the tap. A gurgle, a hiss, and then a stream of beautiful, clear, life-giving water poured out. I drank until my stomach ached. That night, I explored the kitchens. I found walk-in freezers full of food, now slowly thawing. I found knives, cleavers, heavy-duty tenderizing mallets. I found a new base, and more importantly, I found a purpose: survive. But to survive, I couldn't just hide. I needed to know my territory. The next day, I found the mall manager's office. The door was locked, but the wall next to it was just drywall. It took me 2 hours with a meat cleaver, but I hacked my way through. And inside, pinned to a corkboard, was my salvation: a full set of architectural blueprints of the Westgate Galleria. I took them back to the food court. With a pen I found in a drawer, I began to mark it up. My safe zone, the location of the first horde I saw, the broken security gate, the dead-end service corridors. It was no longer just a mall. It was my world, my hunting ground, my prison. And that map was my key to understanding it. Water and thawing burger patties could keep me alive, but they couldn't keep me safe. My arsenal consisted of kitchen knives and a meat cleaver. They were good for close quarters panic, but they were loud, messy, and required me to get far too close to the snapping teeth and grasping hands of the dead. I needed better tools. I needed better weapons. I needed hardware Hanks. According to my new Bible, the blueprints, hardware Hanks was on the first floor, directly below the food court. The problem wasn't the distance, it was the verticality. The escalators were death traps, wide open and exposed. The glass elevator in the main atrium was a transparent tomb waiting to happen. That left the service stairs. I found a stairwell at the back of the food court service corridor, marked staff only. The door was heavy steel. It was my safest bed. The journey down was a descent into a new kind of hell. The stairwell was pitch black, the concrete walls amplifying every sound. My footsteps echoed unnaturally. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of decay and damp concrete. I had a small keychain flashlight, and its beam cut a weak, trembling circle in the oppressive darkness. Every shadow looked like a lurking figure. I moved slowly, one step at a time, pressing myself against the wall, my cleaver held out in front of me. I passed the second-floor landing. The door was slightly ajar. A low, wet, chewing sound came from beyond it. I didn't investigate. I just kept moving down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached the first floor. I listened at the door for a full 5 minutes. Silence. Cautiously, I eased it open. The service corridor was empty, dimly lit by the emergency lights that were still running on some kind of backup battery. I crept along the corridor, following my map. I found the rear entrance to Hardware Hanks, another heavy stockroom door. This one was unlocked. I slipped inside, closing it silently behind me. The stockroom was a paradise of steel, wood, and potential. Shelves towered to the ceiling, laden with boxes of nails, screws, tools, and equipment. But I didn't stop there. I needed to see the main store. I peeked through the swinging doors into the shopping floor, and my blood ran cold. The store was not empty. There were at least 15 of them in there. They were scattered throughout the wide aisles, bumping into shelves of paint cans and lumber, their groans echoing in the large open space. One was a former employee, still wearing his red vest, repeatedly walking into a display of shovels. It was a minefield. But the prize was too great to abandon. I needed what was in those aisles. I spent the next hour just watching, learning their paths. They were shamblers, slow and predictable. They seemed to react primarily to sound. An idea began to form, a risky, stupid idea. I went back to the stockroom and found the lighting control panel, a bank of heavy-duty circuit breakers. I studied it for a moment. Then I found what I was looking for, a wind-up emergency radio. I wound it up, the plastic gears making a grinding noise. I set it to a static field AM station. Then, moving like a ghost, I crept to the far end of the store near the gardening section. I placed the radio on a shelf behind a stack of fertilizer bags. I took a deep breath and sprinted back towards the aisle with the tools. As I ran, I flicked the master switch on a massive display of ceiling fans. They sputtered to life, their blades beginning to whir. The noise was instantaneous. Every single head in the store snapped towards the sound. As one, the horde began to shamble towards the back of the store. That was my cue. I sprinted to the tool aisle. My eyes scanned frantically. Crowbar, hatchet, a heavy-duty mag light that felt like a club, a roll of duct tape, a box of long zip ties. I grabbed it all, stuffing it into a canvas work bag I found. Just as I was about to leave, I saw it. A nail gun. A battery-powered cordless nail gun. And next to it, boxes of 3-inch framing nails. It wasn't a firearm, but it was the next best thing. I grabbed the gun and 2 batteries from their chargers. The horde was getting closer to the fans, confused by the sound. I didn't wait. I ran. Back through the stockroom, into the service corridor, and up the stairs. I didn't stop until I was back in the food court kitchen, the steel door bolted shut behind me. I laid my haul out on a stainless steel table, a hatchet, a crowbar, tools, and the nail gun. I loaded a strip of nails. The battery clicked into place. I aimed it at a bag of frozen potatoes and pulled the trigger. The thwump and hiss of the gun was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For the first time in over a week, I felt something other than fear. I felt a sliver of power. I had survived my first real mission. I had tools. I had weapons. I was no longer just hiding. I was fighting back. The next few weeks fell into a grim routine. I was no longer just a survivor. I was becoming a resident. I methodically cleared and secured the entire second floor. It was a slow, brutal process. I learned to use the nail gun with lethal efficiency. It was silent, deadly, and didn't require me to get within biting distance. I developed a system. Lure one away from the small, scattered groups with a thrown object, then put a nail through its eye socket when it came to investigate. It was gruesome work, but necessary. I created a safe zone encompassing the food court, the bookstore, and the service corridors that connected them. I barricaded the escalators with heavy tables and vending machines. I shattered the glass on the second-floor railings overlooking the atrium, creating a barrier of broken shards to deter any climbers, though I never saw one try. I was building a kingdom on the second floor of a dead world. But the loneliness was a cancer. I talked to myself. I read books aloud from the bookstore. I even set up a few of the mannequins from the Forever fashion store at the tables in the food court, creating a silent, plastic group of dining companions. I called them the Millers. Don't judge me. You do strange things when the only other voices you hear are the groans of the dead. It was on day 42 that I realized I wasn't alone. It started with little things. A tool I knew I had left on a table would be on the floor. A door I was certain I had closed would be slightly ajar. At first, I blamed my own fraying sanity. I was sleep-deprived, malnourished, and under constant stress. It was easy to believe I was just becoming forgetful. Then came the food. I had a meticulous inventory of the non-perishable food I'd scavenged from a small convenience store. I knew exactly how many cans of beans I had. One morning, 2 were missing. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was theft. Panic set in. Was it a person? Another survivor? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Were they friendly? Hostile? How long had they been watching me? I became paranoid. I started setting up primitive alarms, stacks of cans that would fall if a door was opened, tripwires made of string tied to bells I took from a Christmas decorations kiosk. For 3 days, nothing. I started to think I really was losing my mind. On the 4th night, one of my alarms went off. A crash of cans from the direction of the bookstore. I grabbed my hatchet and the nail gun and crept through the service corridors. The bookstore was dark. I swept my flashlight beam across the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but the can trap near the stockroom door was sprung. Someone was in there, or had been. "I know you're in here," I said, my voice a ragged whisper. It was the first time I had spoken to another potential human being in over a month. The sound of my own voice was shocking. Silence. "I'm not going to hurt you," I lied. "Just come out." More silence. I wasn't going into that stockroom. It was a perfect ambush spot. I decided to wait. I backed away, found a concealed spot behind a bookshelf, and sat in the dark, my nail gun pointed at the stockroom door. I waited for hours. The sun began to rise, painting the mall in gray, dusty light through the skylights. Just as I was about to give up, I heard a sound from above, a scraping noise. I looked up. One of the grates for the ventilation system was slowly being pushed aside. A small, wiry figure dropped silently to the floor. It was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16. She was dressed in dark clothes, a backpack slung over her shoulder, and she moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of weeks of practice. She didn't see me. She moved to a shelf, grabbed a book, and then froze. She must have sensed something. Her head slowly turned in my direction. Our eyes met. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the dusty, book-filled room. Two ghosts in the machine. Her eyes were wide with fear. My finger was tense on the trigger of the nail gun. The silence stretched for an eternity. The next move would determine if we were to be friends or enemies, or if one of us would end up dead on the floor of a bookstore. The girl, Maya, I would learn her name was, didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, frozen, a fantasy novel clutched in her hand like a shield. Her knuckles were white. I could see the rapid pulse beating in her throat. I slowly lowered the nail gun, but I didn't put it down. A gesture of non-aggregation, but not one of trust. "You've been stealing my beans," I said. It was a stupid thing to say, but it was all I could think of. A small, shaky laugh escaped her lips. It was a sound so alien and so wonderful in this dead place that it caught me completely off guard. "You have a lot of them," she replied, her voice hoarse, as if from disuse. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice still hard. "Maya, I was at the cinema when it happened. I've been living in the vents." The vents? It was brilliant. The one place I had never thought to check. A network of tunnels that ran throughout the entire mall, safe from the shambling dead below. She had been living above me, around me, for weeks, a silent, unseen observer. "Why didn't you show yourself?" I asked. "Why would I?" she countered, her fear starting to be replaced by a defensive spark. "For all I knew, you were a psycho, the kind of guy who sets up mannequin families in the food court." My face flushed. She had seen that. Of course she had. She'd seen everything. "They're for company," I mumbled, feeling ridiculous. "Look," she said, taking a small step forward. "I'm not a threat. I'm just trying to survive, same as you. I only took what I needed. I saw you had a lot of supplies. I'm out of water." That was the currency of this new world, water. It was the great equalizer. I thought for a moment. My paranoia was screaming at me. She could be a scout for a larger group. She could be waiting for me to lower my guard to put a knife in my back. But my loneliness, my crushing, soul-eating loneliness, argued louder. For the first time in 43 days, I was looking at another living, breathing, thinking human being. I couldn't throw that away. "I have water," I said, "but you're going to owe me for those beans." I led her back to the food court. She walked behind me, and I was acutely aware of every step she took. I could feel her eyes on my back. The trust between us was a fragile, gossamer thread. I gave her a bottle of water, and she drank it like she had been crawling through a desert. She told me her story. She was 16, had skipped school to see a movie marathon. When the world ended, she and a few others had barricaded themselves in the projection booth. But one of them had been scratched. It all fell apart from there. She was the only one who escaped, climbing into the ventilation shaft from the projectionist's access panel. She had been living like a rat in the walls ever since, sneaking out at night to scavenge. She was smart, resourceful, and a hell of a lot tougher than she looked. She knew things about the mall I didn't. She knew about a secondary water tank in the sub-level maintenance area. She knew that the horde was thicker near the west entrance because the morning sun hit the glass doors and the warmth seemed to attract them. She had been observing, while I had been barricading. We were two different kinds of survivors. She was a scout. I was an engineer. We talked for hours. As night fell, we sat in silence for a while, watching the dead mill about in the atrium below. "There's more of them than there used to be," she said quietly. "They're being drawn here from the outside." I had noticed it too. The density of the horde on the first floor was increasing daily. My second-floor kingdom was starting to feel less like a fortress and more like a cage. "We can't stay here forever," I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud, the first time I had truly admitted it to myself. "I know," she whispered. "Do you have a plan?" I looked over at the blueprints, lying on a nearby table, covered in my notes. The thick black line I had drawn to the parking garage seemed to mock me. "I'm working on it," I said. "I'm working on it." That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. But a new kind of fear had taken root. Now I had something to lose. Having Maya around changed the entire dynamic of my existence. The crushing weight of solitude lifted, replaced by a cautious, budding partnership. We fell into a new rhythm. During the day, we'd work on projects, reinforcing the barricades, sorting and cataloging supplies, and, most importantly, planning. Her knowledge from the vents combined with my blueprint-based map gave us an unparalleled understanding of the Galleria. At night, we'd take turns on watch, one of us sleeping while the other listened for any change in the mall's groaning symphony. We were a team. But our new routine was shattered on day 50. We were on the second-floor balcony, looking down into the main atrium, doing our nightly count of the walkers below. It was a ritual we had, a way to gauge their numbers and patterns. 112, Maya whispered, her voice tight. That's 10 more than yesterday. She was right. The ground floor was a sea of shuffling bodies. They were being drawn to the mall from the ruined city outside, perhaps by some primal memory of it as a gathering place. It was a slow-motion siege. We're running out of time, I said, tracing the escape route on my map in my mind. The plan needs to be ready soon. And then we heard it. It was a sound so out of place, so alien to our world, that it took a moment to register. A whisper. It was faint, carried on the stale air currents of the atrium. A soft, sibilant shh. It didn't come from any single walker. It seemed to come from the horde itself. We both froze, staring down into the mass of bodies. They were just shuffling, moaning, as always. Did you hear that? Maya breathed, her eyes wide. I heard it, I confirmed, my hand instinctively going to the hatchet on my belt. We listened, straining our ears. For a long minute, there was nothing but the usual guttural chorus. I was about to dismiss it as my mind playing tricks on me. And then it came again. Shh. Come down. It was clearer this time. A rasping, dry whisper that seemed to have a dozen sources at once. It was intelligent. It was a lure. My blood ran cold. This changed everything. The walkers we knew were mindless, driven by a single, simple instinct: hunger. They were dangerous, yes, but they were predictable. They were animals. This was something else. This was cunning. What are they? Maya asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, I said, my mind racing. Some of them must be different, evolving, maybe? We watched the horde with new eyes, a new kind of terror dawning. We started looking for the source. Was one of them whispering, their voice carrying, or were multiple ones doing it? We couldn't tell. Over the next few days, we heard it again. Faint whispers weaving through the groans. Simple words. Help. Us. So hungry. They were using mimicry, using the last vestiges of the words their human mouths once knew to lure in prey. They were learning. They were adapting. This was a new threat, one far more dangerous than anything we had faced before. The shambling, mindless puppets were bad enough, but intelligent predators, ones that could think, communicate, and strategize? We were no longer just trapped with monsters. We were trapped with hunters. The escape plan, which had been a long-term goal, suddenly became an urgent, desperate necessity. The black line on my map was no longer a path to freedom. It was a gauntlet, guarded by an enemy that was getting smarter every single day. The whispers from the floor below became our new clock, each sibilant sound a tick, counting down the last remaining seconds of our safety. The discovery of the whisperers, as we started calling them, put a new, frantic energy into our preparations. We were on borrowed time. But our preparations hit a major snag. Maya got sick. It started with a cough, a deep, rattling thing that shook her small frame. Then came the fever. By day 60, she was burning up, delirious, wrapped in every blanket we could find in the home goods store. I checked her for bites or scratches a dozen times, my heart pounding with dread each time. There were none. This was just a regular, old-world sickness. A bad case of bronchitis or pneumonia, probably from the damp, dusty air of the vents she'd called home for so long. In the old world, a trip to the doctor and some antibiotics would have fixed it. In this world, it was a death sentence. Unless I could do something. There was a Health First pharmacy on the ground floor, a treasure trove of modern medicine sitting right in the middle of the whisperer-infested horde. It was the most dangerous place in the mall. "Don't go," Maya rasped from her makeshift bed, her voice weak. "It's not worth it. Too risky." "It is worth it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're a team, remember?"
We look out for each other. I spent a full day planning to run from the second-floor balcony, my binoculars pressed to my eyes. The pharmacy was near the center of the atrium. It was a glass-fronted store, an island in a sea of the dead. Getting to it would be the easy part. I could use the maintenance catwalks that crisscrossed the ceiling of the atrium. I'd discovered them with Maya weeks ago. They were dusty, narrow, and terrifyingly high, but they were a straight shot to the roof of the pharmacy. The problem was getting down. I'd have to rappel. I had plenty of climbing rope from the sporting goods store. The real challenge would be making a silent entry, getting what I needed, and getting back up to the catwalk before the horde converged on my position. I geared up. I took the nail gun, my hatchet, and a backpack for the supplies. I fashioned a harness from climbing gear. As I was about to leave, I looked at Maya. She was asleep, her breathing shallow. I felt a surge of fear so powerful it almost buckled my knees. My fear of the walkers was a primal fight-or-flight instinct. This was different. This was the fear of losing the only person I had. It made me determined. It made me reckless. I got to the catwalk access panel in a service closet. The climb up was dark and claustrophobic. The catwalk itself was a narrow strip of metal grating, suspended 50 feet above the atrium floor. The horde shuffled and groaned below me, completely unaware of my presence. The scale at a numbers from this vantage point was staggering. There had to be 200 of them down there. I moved slowly, carefully, my rubber-soled boots making no sound on the grating. The whispers drifted up, clearer now. "So cold. Open the door." It was unnerving, a chorus of lies from dead throats. I reached the spot directly above the pharmacy. I secured my rope to a steel support beam and clipped in my harness. This was the point of no return. I swung my legs over the side and began my descent. I landed silently on the roof of the pharmacy. The roof had a maintenance hatch. I prayed it was unlocked. With my crowbar, I gently pried at the edges. It was stiff, but it opened with a low groan. I froze, listening. The groans from the atrium floor didn't change in pitch. They hadn't heard. I dropped through the hatch into the pharmacy stockroom. It was dark and smelled of antiseptic and dust. I used my flashlight to scan the shelves. I was looking for broad-spectrum antibiotics, amoxicillin, ciprofloxacillin, doxycycline. I didn't know what she had, so I grabbed them all, stuffing them into my backpack along with painkillers, bandages, and bottles of rubbing alcohol. I was about to head back to the roof when I heard a noise from the main store. A faint, rhythmic thump, thump. I crept to the door and looked through the small wire glass window. There was a single walker in the store. A former pharmacist by his white coat. He was trapped behind the checkout counter, and he was repeatedly, mindlessly, banging his head against a plexiglass divider. He was my only obstacle to the front of the store, where I knew they kept the cough syrup and other useful over-the-counter meds. I could just leave. I had the antibiotics. But the cough was tearing Maya apart. I had to try. I opened the stockroom door, my nail gun raised. The sound of the door latch clicking made the pharmacist's head snap in my direction. He let out a low groan and started stumbling towards me, his path blocked by the counter. He was trapped. It was an easy shot. I raised the nail gun, aimed for his head,
And then I saw it. Tucked into the pocket of his white coat was a small, laminated card, an ID badge. His name was Stephen. He had a goofy, smiling picture. He looked like someone's dad. For a split second, I hesitated. He was a person. He had a name. And in that split second of hesitation, Stephen lunged, his body hitting the counter with unexpected force. The entire structure shifted, and a display of vitamin bottles crashed to the floor. The sound was like a bomb going off in the silent mall. And from the atrium, the chorus of groans instantly changed. It became a hungry, focused roar. They were coming. Panic is a cold, sharp thing. It cuts through all rational thought. My training, my careful planning, it all evaporated in the thunderous crash of the vitamin display. The roar from the atrium was an answer, a dinner bell. I didn't hesitate anymore. I fired the nail gun. The nail hit Stephen in the forehead with a sickening thwack. He staggered back and fell behind a counter, silenced. But the damage was done. I could hear them outside the pharmacy, dozens of them, banging on the glass walls. The whispers were gone, replaced by a singular, hungry desire. I scrambled for the cough syrup, grabbed 3 bottles, and ran for the stockroom. I hauled myself up the rope, my muscles screaming in protest, adrenaline my only fuel. I got back to the catwalk just as the first of the pharmacy's glass panels shattered below. The sound of the horde pouring into the small space was terrifying. I didn't look back. I practically ran across the narrow catwalk, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I made it back to the service closet and slammed the access panel shut. I leaned against the wall in the darkness, panting, my entire body trembling. I had the medicine, but I had made a catastrophic mistake. I had led them right to our doorstep. By the time I got back to the food court, the situation had gotten worse.
The noise from the pharmacy run had drawn every walker in the mall to the atrium, and now they had figured out where the sound came from. They were congregating at the bottom of the escalators, a massive, writhing sea of the dead, all staring up towards our second-floor fortress. "What did you do?" Maya whispered. She was awake, her face pale and sweaty. I dumped the backpack on the floor. "I got the medicine," I said, my voice shaky. "But I think I kicked the hornet's nest." The banging started about an hour later. They weren't smart, not in a human sense, but they had a kind of relentless collective drive. They pushed against the barricades at the top of the escalators. The heavy vending machines we had wedged there began to groan under the combined weight of dozens of bodies. We spent the next 24 hours in a state of constant siege. We could hear the metal of the barricades straining, the wood of the table splintering. We dragged everything we could find to reinforce them. More tables, shelves, even the plastic mannequins, the millers, were sacrificed to the cause, their hollow bodies used to jam the gaps. The whispers returned, more insidious than ever. They were coming from right below us now. So close. Let us in. It was a psychological war as much as a physical one. They were testing our defenses, probing for a weakness, their dead voices scratching at the edges of our sanity. I administered the antibiotics to Maya, crushing them up in water. I could only hope I had guessed right and that they would work. Her fever raged, and she drifted in and out of consciousness, her weak moans mixing with the groans of the dead outside. I was alone again, but this time it was worse. I was a guard on the walls of a castle that was about to fall, the person I was trying to protect dying inside. On the morning of day 61, I saw it, a new type of walker. I was peering through a small gap in our barricade when I noticed it. It was taller than the others and leaner, but that wasn't what was different. It was climbing. It was pulling itself up the side of the escalator, using the fallen bodies of other walkers as handholds. It moved with a slow, deliberate, spider-like grace that was utterly terrifying. It wasn't a shambler. It was something new, something faster, smarter, and more agile. It reached the top of the pile, its milky white eyes locking directly onto mine. It let out a screech, a high-pitched, piercing sound that cut through the low moans of the horde. And then it leaped. It cleared the last few feet and landed on our side of the barricade. The siege was broken. The second floor was no longer safe. The creature, I started calling them leapers in my head, was a blur of motion. It was all sinew and bone, its movements unnaturally fast and jerky. It reached the top of the pile, its milky white eyes locking directly onto mine. It let out a screech, a high-pitched, piercing sound that cut through the low moans of the horde. And then it leaped. It cleared the last few feet and landed on our side of the barricade. The siege was broken. The second floor was no longer safe. The creature, I started calling them leapers in my head, was a blur of motion. It was all sinew and bone, its movements unnaturally fast and jerky. It reached the top of the pile, its milky white eyes locking directly onto mine. It let out a screech, a high-pitched, piercing sound that cut through the low moans of the horde. And then it leaped. It cleared the last few feet and landed on our side of the barricade. The siege was broken. The second floor was no longer safe. The creature, I started calling them leapers in my head, was a blur of motion. It was all sinew and bone, its movements unnaturally fast and jerky.
I fired the nail gun wildly. The first shot missed, hitting the wall behind it. The second hit it in the shoulder, causing it to stumble, but it didn't slow down. It screeched again, a sound like tearing metal, and lunged. I brought my hatchet up in a desperate two-handed arc. The blade connected with its skull with a sickening crunch. It collapsed at my feet, a tangle of limbs. But the damage was done. Its screech had acted as a beacon. The rest of the horde surged forward with a new ferocity. The barricade groaned, then buckled. A vending machine toppled over with a deafening crash, and the dead began to pour through the gap. This was it, the fall of our fortress. Alex! Maya's voice was weak but sharp. She was sitting up, her eyes wide with feverish terror, a kitchen knife clutched in her hand. The antibiotics seemed to be working. Her fever had broken slightly, but she was in no condition to fight. "Get back!" I yelled, firing another nail into the face of the first walker to shamble through the breach. "Go to the bookstore, barricade the door." I had to buy her time. I stood my ground at the breach, a one-man army against the tide. I was a machine of death, nail gun in one hand, hatchet in the other. I fired, swung, kicked, and shoved. For every one I put down, two more took its place. They were an endless, mindless river of decay. My nails ran out. The gun clicked uselessly. I threw it at an oncoming walker and focused on the hatchet. My arm ached, my lungs burned. I was covered in black, viscous blood. I was losing. They were pushing me back, step by step, across the food court. I could see Maya dragging a heavy bookshelf in front of the bookstore entrance. She was a fighter. I just needed to give her a few more seconds. I saw another leaper. It was crawling on the ceiling, its limbs bent at impossible angles. It was heading straight for Maya. There was no time. I abandoned the breach and sprinted towards the bookstore, yelling her name. The leaper dropped from the ceiling, landing between us. It was faster than the first one. It ignored me, its eyes fixed on the weaker prey. It sprang towards Maya. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw my hatchet. It spun end over end, a perfect, desperate spiral. The blade buried itself in the leaper's back. It shrieked and twisted, giving Maya the second she needed to scramble behind the bookshelf and brace it. The leaper turned its attention to me, its face a mask of rage. It pulled the hatchet from its own back, seemingly unfazed by the wound, and brandished it like a weapon. A zombie wielding my own hatchet. The sheer insanity of it almost made me laugh. I was unarmed, exhausted, and facing a new evolution of the enemy. The rest of the horde was closing in, cutting off my retreat. I was cornered. It was over. And then the mall's emergency announcement system crackled to life. A deafening burst of static, followed by a pre-recorded message. "Attention shoppers, the Westgate Galleria will be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your final purchases." It was the generator. In its final death throes, it must have surged, triggering the automated closing announcement. The sound, amplified by 100 speakers throughout the mall, was cataclysmic. Every single walker, including the leaper in front of me, froze. Their heads all snapped towards the nearest speaker. They were confused, their simple brains overloaded by the sudden, overwhelming noise. This was my chance. I didn't think twice. I turned and ran, not towards the bookstore, but towards the service corridor. I had to lead them away from Maya. I slammed a fire door shut behind me, the sound of the horde resuming their pursuit a moment later, now drawn by the new sound of my running feet. I ran through the dark, twisting service corridors of my former kingdom, the recorded voice of a dead world chasing me. "Thank you for shopping at the Westgate Galleria." The voice cut out, and the main lights flickered one last time, then died, plunging the entire mall into absolute darkness. The generator was dead. Our time was up. Our home was lost. All we had left was the escape plan. I spent that night in a cramped electrical closet, the door wedged shut with a metal stool. My only light was the faint green glow of my digital watch. The darkness was total. The silence was not. The horde that had taken the second floor was now roaming, a constant shuffling presence just outside my door. I had lost everything. My safe zone, my supplies, my weapons. I had my crowbar, which I'd had on my belt, but my hatchet and nail gun were gone. And worse, I was separated from Maya. Was she even still alive? Had she managed to secure the bookstore, or had the horde broken through? The uncertainty was a physical weight, crushing my chest. I couldn't afford to despair. Panic was a luxury I didn't have. I closed my eyes and forced myself to visualize the blueprints, the map that was now burned into my memory. The original escape plan was a bust. It relied on a staged, methodical approach from our secure base. Now, we had no base. We were rats in the walls again. We needed a new plan, a fast, loud, and brutally effective plan, a Hail Mary pass. The objective was the same, the armored security van in the P2 level of the underground parking garage. The van was my ace in the hole. I'd spent weeks working on it during my scavenging runs. I'd siphoned gas from other cars. I'd hot-wired the ignition. I'd reinforced the windows with metal grating from the hardware store. It was a tank. The problem was the 500 yards of death between us and it. I started thinking not about how to avoid the horde, but how to use it, how to control it. The closing announcement had given me the idea. Sound. Overwhelming directional sound. It was the key. My new plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, the reunion. I had to get to Maya. I hoped she was still in the bookstore. I would have to travel through the service corridors, a risky move in total darkness, but safer than the main mall. Phase 2, the distraction. This was the crazy part. We needed to draw every single walker in the mall to one specific point, as far away from our escape route as possible. My target was the cinema. It was on the 3rd floor, at the far eastern end of the mall. It had a powerful sound system and was easily defensible for a short period. The plan was to get to the projection booth, rig the sound system to play something at maximum volume, and create a sonic beacon that would pull the entire horde upwards, towards the east. Phase 3, the run. While the horde was being drawn to the cinema, we would move in the opposite direction, down, to the western service stairs that led directly to the P2 parking level. It was the longest route, but it would be the clearest. If the distraction worked, we'd be moving against the tide. We'd have a window, maybe only 5 or 10 minutes, to get to the van and get the hell out. It was a plan with 1,000 points of failure. If we couldn't get to each other, it failed. If we couldn't rig the sound system, it failed. If the distraction wasn't powerful enough or didn't last long enough, it failed. And if we encountered a pack of leapers who might be smart enough to ignore the sound, well, that was a possibility I refused to dwell on. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing it in my mind, going over every turn, every door, every potential bottleneck. I used my crowbar to pry the faceplate off an old intercom on the wall. The wiring was simple. I managed to splice it into the main system. I held the small speaker to my ear. Static. But it was connected. This was my only way to communicate with Maya, if she was even able to hear it. As the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the cracks in the door, I took a deep breath. "Maya," I whispered into the intercom, my voice raspy. "If you can hear me, I'm alive. The plan has changed. I'm coming for you. Get ready to run." There was no response from the intercom, just the faint hiss of an open line. My heart sank. Was she gone? Was the intercom in the bookstore even working? I had to assume the best. I had to believe she was alive and waiting. I levered the stool away from the door and peeked out. The service corridor was empty, but the sounds from the main mall were close. The horde was on this level now. Moving through the dark was a nightmare. I had my keychain flashlight, but I used it sparingly, only in short bursts to get my bearings. Its beam felt like a spotlight, a kill-me signal to anything lurking in the shadows. I moved by touch, one hand on the wall, my crowbar held tight in the other. Every scuff of my boot, every breath I took, sounded like a thunderclap. It took me what felt like an eternity to navigate the labyrinthine corridors to the back of the bookstore. The stockroom door was closed. I listened. Nothing. I gave 3 soft, deliberate knocks, the signal we had established weeks ago. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. "Maya, it's me. Open the door." A faint scraping sound came from the other side. The lock clicked, and the door opened a crack. Maya's face appeared in the gap, pale and grim. She looked better. The fever was gone. Relief washed over me so intensely that my knees felt weak. "I heard you," she whispered, pulling me inside and closing the door. "On the intercom, I thought they'd gotten you." "They almost did," I said, taking in the state of the bookstore. She had done an incredible job. The main entrance was completely blocked by a mountain of bookshelves and furniture. It wouldn't hold forever, but it was a formidable barrier. "They're trying to get in," she said, gesturing to the barricade. "The whispers, they're right outside. They know we're in here." I could hear them now, faint, dry whispers seeping through the walls. "Come, out. New, meet." I quickly explained the new plan, the cinema, the distraction, the run for the van. She listened intently, her eyes wide. "It's insane," she said when I was done. "It's our only shot," I countered. "We're not surviving another siege." She nodded, a look of hard resolve on her face. "Okay, what do we need?" We spent the next hour prepping. We were low on supplies. We each had a small backpack. We filled them with the last of our bottled water and scavenged protein bars. Our armory was pathetic. I had my crowbar, Maya had her kitchen knife, and a long, sharp shard of glass she had wrapped in tape to make a handle. It was practically a suicide mission. "Ready?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "No, but let's do it anyway." Our route to the cinema was on the 3rd floor. We'd have to go up. The nearest service stairs were 100 yards away. We decided to risk the main mall. It was a gamble. The horde was dispersed, but going through the open was faster than navigating the dark corridors. We climbed out a high window in the stockroom, onto the roof of a small coffee kiosk. From there, we could see the state of the 2nd floor. It was a mess, debris everywhere. Bodies of the walkers I had taken down were scattered across the floor. And the horde was there, a loose collection of shambling figures. We moved from storefront to storefront, using the recessed doorways for cover. It was a terrifying game of red light, green light. We'd watch for a gap in their patterns, then sprint across the open space to the next bit of cover, our hearts pounding. We made it to the service stairs undetected. We were halfway there. The climb to the 3rd floor was tense. Every step echoed. When we opened the door to the 3rd floor corridor, we saw that it was mostly empty. The bulk of the horde was still on the lower floors.
The cinema was at the end of a long, wide hallway, its garish, brightly colored entrance looking absurd in the grim gray light. We were almost there, and then we saw them. A pack of 3 leapers. They were crouched in the middle of the hallway, hunched over a body. They hadn't noticed us yet. They were different from the ones I'd seen before. They seemed to be communicating, using a series of low clicks and guttural hisses. They were a pack, and they were directly between us and our objective. There was no way around them. We had to go through. We had to go through. We were pinned down behind a large potted plant, the fake leaves offering little more than psychological cover. The 3 leapers were 100 feet away, still preoccupied with their meal. "They're faster than us," Maya whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We can't outrun them in the open." "We don't have to," I whispered back. "We just have to be smarter." I looked around, my eyes scanning for any advantage. My gaze fell on the Galaxy Gulp soda stand next to us. It had one of those large cylindrical trash cans with a swinging lid. An idea, born of desperation, sparked in my mind. "I'm going to create a diversion," I said. "When they move, you run straight for the cinema. Don't look back. Barricade the door to the projection booth. I'll be right behind you." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Something stupid," I replied. I grabbed the heavy metal trash can. It was about a quarter full of old garbage, making it unwieldy and heavy. I hefted it onto my shoulder. "On 3, I said. 1, 2. I didn't wait for 3. I burst from behind the plant and hurled the trash can with every ounce of strength I had. It flew end over end down the long corridor, crashing and clattering, spilling debris everywhere. The noise was incredible. The 3 leapers instantly snapped their heads up, their white eyes fixing on the source of the sound. They let out a chorus of angry hisses and bounded towards the trash can. "Go!" I yelled at Maya. She was already moving, sprinting down the opposite side of the hallway towards the cinema entrance.
2 of the leapers were focused on the trash can, batting it around like angry cats with a toy. But the 3rd one, the largest of the pack, saw Maya. It changed direction, its powerful legs eating up the distance between them with terrifying speed. I wasn't going to make it to Maya in time to help. I was too far away. I looked around frantically and saw it, a fire hose cabinet on the wall. I smashed the glass with my crowbar and pulled out the heavy brass nozzle. I didn't unravel the hose, I just ran straight at the leaper, swinging the heavy nozzle like a medieval flail. It heard me coming and turned at the last second. It was fast, but I was fueled by pure adrenaline. I swung the nozzle in a wide horizontal arc. It connected with the leaper's legs, sweeping them out from under it. The creature went down in a heap with a surprised screech. I didn't stop. I brought the nozzle down on its head, again and again, a grim, rhythmic, brutal act. I didn't stop until it was a twitching ruin on the floor. I looked up. Maya had made it. She was inside the cinema lobby. The other 2 leapers had abandoned the trash can and were now bounding towards me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my lungs on fire. I dove through the cinema doors just as Maya slammed them shut. We leaned against them, our combined weight holding them closed as the leapers began to slam against the other side. "The projection booth," I gasped. We ran through the lobby, past the deserted concession stand, and up the small flight of stairs to the booth. We barricaded the door with a film canister cabinet and a heavy old projector. We were safe for the moment. The booth looked out over the main theater. It was a huge room with hundreds of seats. The sound system was professional grade, with speakers the size of refrigerators lining the walls. This would work. "Find a movie," I said to Maya, gesturing to a rack of digital hard drives. "Something loud, explosions, music, anything." While she searched, I went to work on the wiring. I bypassed the master controls, hot wiring the amplifiers directly to the main power feed. I cranked every dial to maximum. It was a crude setup, but it would be deafeningly effective. Maya found a drive. "How about Apocalypse Now?" she said, a small, ironic smile on her face. Perfect, I said. I plugged it in. The system hummed to life. I looked at Maya, my hand on the main play button. Once I hit this, there's no going back, I said. Every one of them in the mall is going to come here. We'll have maybe 10 minutes to get to the garage. She nodded, her face set. Do it. I slammed my hand down on the button. For a second, nothing. Then, the sound of helicopter blades erupted from the speakers, a thunderous whump, whump, whump that shook the entire room. It was followed by the iconic opening chords of The End by The Doors. The sound was a physical force, so loud it felt like it was rearranging my insides. It was perfect. We looked out the small projection window. Down on the third-floor corridor, the two leapers who had been banging on the lobby doors were now utterly confused, screeching and clawing at their own heads, disoriented by the sonic assault. And from the floors below, a new sound began to rise. A great collective roar from 1,000 dead throats, all turning, all moving, all being drawn towards the beautiful, terrible noise. Phase 2 was a success. Now we had to survive Phase 3. We didn't leave through the door. The leapers were still out there, disoriented but dangerous. We used the fire escape hatch in the projection booth ceiling. It led out onto the flat, tar-covered roof of the cinema complex. The sound from inside was a dull, throbbing bass that vibrated through the soles of our shoes. Below us, the city was a graveyard, silent and still under the gray sky. "Which way?" Maya yelled over the noise. I pointed towards the western edge of the mall. "The service stairs are over there. We have to get back inside." We ran across the roof, our feet crunching on loose gravel. We found the roof access door I had marked on my blueprints. It was locked with a heavy padlock. "Damn it," I cursed. "Stand back," Maya said. She pulled the shard of glass from her belt. She examined the lock, then wedged the point of the shard into the keyhole. She began to twist and probe, her movements surprisingly deft. "Where did you learn to do that?" I asked, amazed. "My older brother was a delinquent," she said, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "I picked up a few things." After a tense 30 seconds, there was a satisfying click. The lock sprang open. I stared at her. She just shrugged. "You're full of surprises." We opened the door and descended into the darkness of another stairwell. This was the one that led all the way down to the parking garage. The concrete walls around us were vibrating with the music from the cinema. The distraction was working. We just had to be faster than the horde. We moved down the stairs as quickly and quietly as we could. Floor 3, floor 2. We reached the landing for the first floor and paused. I peeked through the small wire glass window in the door. I could see the main atrium. It was a river of bodies, a tidal wave of the dead, all flowing in one direction, towards the escalators that led up to the cinema. It was a mesmerizing and horrifying sight. They were completely single-minded, ignoring everything else, drawn by the sound. Our path was clear. "It's working," I breathed. "Let's go." We continued our descent. Past the first floor and into the sublevels. The air grew colder, damper. The sounds of the cinema faded, replaced by the dripping of water and the hum of the emergency lights. We reached the door for the P2 parking level. This was it, the final gate. I put my ear to the cold steel. I heard nothing. No groans, no shuffling. I looked at Maya. She gave me a nervous nod. I put my hand on the handle and pushed. The door swung open onto the vast, cavernous space of the underground parking garage. It was eerily silent. A concrete forest of pillars and parked cars, lit by the sickly yellow glow of the backup lights. And there it was, at the far end of the row, exactly where it should be, the armored security van. A beautiful, boxy, steel-plated angel of salvation. We started moving towards it, weaving through the cars. It felt too easy. My senses were on high alert. Something felt wrong. The silence was too perfect. We were 50 feet from the van when we saw them. They weren't shamblers. They weren't shamblers. They were a pack of 5 leapers, crouched silently on top of cars, their white eyes glowing in the dim light. They had been waiting. They were smart enough to ignore the loud, obvious distraction. They had anticipated our route. It was an ambush. And the van, our only hope of escape, was on the other side of them. There was no way to fight them. Not 5 of them. Not with a crowbar and a piece of glass. They were between us and the van. A silent, lethal barricade. They watched us, their heads tilted, a terrifying, predatory intelligence in their gaze. They weren't moving yet. They were enjoying this, toying with their prey. "What do we do?" Maya whispered, her back pressed against mine. "We can't go back up." "We don't," I said, my mind racing, desperately searching for a solution. "We need another distraction, something down here." My eyes darted around the garage. Cars, dozens of them. And what do cars have? Alarms. "The red convertible," I said, pointing with my chin to a flashy sports car about 20 feet to our left. "Stay here. When I move, you run for the van. Don't wait for me. Just get in and lock the doors." "Alex, no, I'm not leaving you." "You have to," I insisted, my voice low and urgent. "One of us has to make it. That's the only way this works. Get to the van." Before she could argue, I took off. I sprinted towards the convertible, my footsteps echoing in the silent garage. The leapers reacted instantly. Their heads snapped in my direction. As one, they leapt from their perches and bounded towards me, their claws clicking on the concrete. I reached the car a split second before the first one. I didn't have time to be delicate. I swung my crowbar with all my might into the driver's side window. The glass exploded inwards. I reached inside, my hand fumbling for the steering column. The first leaper was on the hood of the car, its screeching face inches from mine. I ignored it and kept fumbling, my fingers searching for the panic button on the key fob that was still in the ignition. The second leaper landed on the roof. The car rocked under their combined weight. I found the button. I pressed it. The car alarm blared to life, a deafening, piercing siren that filled the enclosed space of the garage. At the same time, the headlights began to flash, strobe lighting the entire scene. The effect on the leapers was instantaneous and violent. The sudden high-frequency noise and flashing lights seemed to overload their senses. They shrieked in pain, clawing at their own heads, disoriented and confused. It was the cinema trick, but on a smaller, more concentrated scale. "Maya, go!" I screamed over the siren. I saw her break from cover, a small, fleeting shadow running for the van. The leapers were too distracted to notice her, but they were recovering quickly. One of them shook its head, and its eyes focused on me. It leaped from the hood, its claws extended. I ducked, and it sailed over me, crashing into the side of another car. I didn't wait around. I scrambled away from the convertible and ran for the van, my lungs screaming for air. Maya was at the driver's side door, pulling it open. I could hear the leapers behind me, their screeches of pain turning back into screeches of rage. They were coming. I was 10 feet from the van, 5 feet. I dove head first through the open passenger door as Maya slammed her door shut and hit the locks. The thump clunk of the heavy locks engaging was the best sound I had ever heard. A moment later, the van rocked as the leapers threw themselves against it, their claws scraping uselessly against the reinforced steel. We were inside. We were safe. "The keys!" Maya yelled. They weren't in the ignition. I had hot-wired it, but I'd left the actual keys hidden. I reached under the driver's seat and pulled them out, tossing them to her. She jammed them into the ignition and turned. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. The sound was a symphony. Maya didn't hesitate. She slammed the van into drive and floored it. The van lurched forward. We smashed through 2 of the leapers, sending them flying. The others scattered. We sped towards the exit ramp, the tires squealing. The heavy metal bait at the garage exit was down. "It's blocked," Maya shouted. "Hold on," I yelled. Maya aimed the van straight at the gate. "Ram it!" The impact was deafening. Metal screamed and twisted. The van shuddered, but its armored frame held.
The gate buckled, bent, and then broke free from its hinges. We were through. The keys, Maya yelled. They weren't in the ignition. I had hot-wired it, but I'd left the actual keys hidden. I reached under the driver's seat and pulled them out, tossing them to her. She jammed them into the ignition and turned. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. The sound was a symphony. Maya didn't hesitate. She slammed the van into drive and floored it. The van lurched forward. We smashed through 2 of the leapers, sending them flying. The others scattered. We sped towards the exit ramp, the tire squealing. The heavy metal gate at the garage exit was down. "It's blocked," Maya shouted. "Hold on," I yelled. Maya aimed the van straight at the gate. "Ram it!" The impact was deafening. Metal screamed and twisted. The van shuddered, but its armored frame held. The gate buckled, bent, and then broke free from its hinges. We were through. We sped up the ramp and burst out into the daylight. The sudden brightness was blinding. We were out. We were free. The world outside was a silent, gray panorama of urban decay. We drove through the deserted streets of the city, the only sound the rumble of our van's engine. We passed abandoned cars. Some crashed, others just left in the middle of the road. We saw no people. We saw no walkers. It was a ghost town. I looked back at the Westgate Galleria, a monstrous concrete tomb receding in the distance. 78 days. I had spent 78 days of my life in that building. It had been my prison, my sanctuary, my hunting ground, my home. I felt a strange mix of relief and something else, a kind of grief. I had survived it. We had survived it. Maya was focused on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her face a mask of intense concentration. She handled the heavy van with a skill that belied her age. "We did it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We actually did it." "You did it," I corrected her. "That lock-picking thing, the sprint to the cinema, you saved my ass back there more than once." A small smile touched her lips. "We saved each other," she said. "We're a team." We drove for hours, heading east, away from the city, towards the rising sun. We didn't know where we were going. We had no destination. The plan had only ever been about getting out. We had never thought about what came next. The road ahead was uncertain. The world was still filled with the dead, with monsters, both human and not. Surviving the mauled was just one battle in a war that was far from over. But as I looked at the endless, open road stretching out before us, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope. We were alive. We were free. We had a full tank of gas. And we had each other. I reached into the glove compartment and found the digital audio recorder. I had managed to grab it before we left the bookstore. I checked the battery. Still good. I hit the record button. "Log entry, day 79, I said, my voice hoarse. "My name is Alex. This is Maya. We escaped the Westgate Galleria. We're on the open road now, heading east. We don't know what we'll find out there. But for the first time in a long time, we're moving forward." I stopped the recording. I looked over at Maya. She glanced at me, and for the first time, her expression wasn't one of fear or determination. It was just calm. The sun was higher now, breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the empty highway. The world might have ended, but our story was just beginning.